The empires of the future are the empires of the mind, a statement made by Winston Churchill in 1943 that has echoed across decades as one of the most visionary insights into the trajectory of human civilization. And when one considers the meaning behind these words, it becomes evident that Churchill was not merely reflecting on the wartime realities of his day, but rather laying down a prophecy about the future of power, influence, and human progress. Because in every age before his, empires were measured by the strength of armies, the reach of colonial possessions, and the weight of gold stored in treasuries. Yet as humanity advanced through the 20th century into the 21st, the nature of dominance shifted away from physical conquest and toward intellectual, cultural, and technological supremacy, suggesting that true power does not rest in tanks or battleships or the number of territories one controls, but instead in ideas, innovation, knowledge, and the ability to shape the collective imagination of humankind. And if one reflects carefully on this transformation, it is clear that the greatest leaps in modern history have not been the expansion of borders, but the expansion of thought. For when humanity cracked the code of flight, it shrank the globe. When it split the atom, it redefined war and energy. When it mapped the genome, it unlocked the secrets of life, and when it created the internet, it connected billions of minds in a single invisible web. All of which serve as illustrations of Churchill's vision that empires of the mind, not of the land, would dictate the fate of nations, because those who could lead in knowledge creation, technological advancement, and cultural influence would command a far greater empire than those who simply raised flags over conquered soil. And as the 21st century unfolds, we are witnessing this prophecy in full bloom. For the greatest superpowers today are not merely those with strong militaries, but those who lead in information technology, artificial intelligence, scientific research, education, and media influence, with Silicon Valley, not merely Washington or Beijing, often being perceived as the seat of global authority, since corporations that own data, algorithms, platforms, and knowledge infrastructure now wield extraordinary influence over how billions think, act, consume, and even vote, demonstrating how the empire of the mind surpasses the empire of geography. And when we reflect on this, we must also consider that this shift carries both promises and perils, because while intellectual empires can liberate humanity from ignorance, disease, and poverty, they can also enslave it under monopolies of thought, disinformation, or manipulation, reminding us that the empire of the mind is not inherently benevolent or malevolent, but simply powerful, shaped by the values, ethics, and intentions of those who build it. And therefore, the responsibility of our generation is immense, for we are the architects of the future empires Churchill foresaw, and we must ask ourselves whether our intellectual dominance will be used to empower all or to concentrate wealth and control in the hands of a few, because knowledge, like any empire, can be weaponized or democratized, and the trajectory we choose will determine whether the empire of the mind ushers in a golden age of creativity and cooperation, or a dystopian age of surveillance and subjugation. And to further appreciate Churchill's foresight, one must remember that he was speaking in 1943 at Harvard University during the crucible of World War II, when the old empires of Europe were crumbling under the weight of total war, and the question of what would define the post-war order was burning in every leader's mind. And while others may have focused on military alliances, spheres of influence, and territorial adjustments, Churchill glimpsed a deeper truth that the defining battles of the future would not be fought with bombs and battleships, but with ideas, education, innovation, and the harnessing of human intellect, which is why his words remain profoundly relevant in our present moment. For today, the greatest contest between nations is not necessarily in their military clashes, but in their competition for technological supremacy, their race for scientific breakthroughs, their ability to attract and retain the brightest minds, and their success in creating cultures that inspire loyalty, admiration, and emulation across the globe. And it is telling that in our world, the nations most admired are not simply those with large armies, but those that pioneer medical cures, create artistic masterpieces, launch rockets into space, build resilient economies, and project cultural influence through film, literature, and digital platforms, all of which are forms of mental and cultural empires that reach beyond borders and endure far longer than physical conquest. For Rome may have fallen, the British Empire may have dissolved, but the philosophical contributions of Greece, the scientific revolution of Europe, and the technological imagination of Silicon Valley endure as mental empires that continue to shape our lives, reminding us that while political empires are transient, intellectual empires are eternal. And herein lies the heart of Churchill's statement, because the mind, unlike land, cannot be occupied in the traditional sense, and yet when a powerful idea takes hold of humanity, it can colonize imaginations across centuries, and thus to build the empire of the mind is to plant seeds that may flower long after one is gone, shaping generations yet unborn. And if we take this seriously, it means that the duty of every thinker, educator, leader, and innovator is to contribute positively to this vast empire, recognizing that every idea taught, every discovery made, every invention created, and every story told becomes a brick in the edifice of the intellectual empire that will define the future. And if we take a step back and consider the digital age specifically, we see perhaps the most literal manifestation of Churchill's vision, because the internet has effectively built a planetary empire of the mind where billions of people across continents share, debate, and exchange thoughts in real time, erasing borders of geography and replacing them with networks of knowledge. And yet, even within this miracle lies the danger of misinformation, propaganda, and polarization, again reminding us that an empire of the mind can liberate or enslave depending on its stewardship. And perhaps this is why Churchill's words continue to inspire, but also caution, because they remind us that the future is not predetermined by weapons or wealth, but by wisdom and will. And thus, the true challenge of our time is not to expand territory, but to expand consciousness, not to subjugate others, but to elevate humanity as a whole. And if nations, corporations, and individuals commit to this higher vision, then the empire of the mind can become the greatest civilization humanity has ever built, one not based on domination, but on collaboration, not on conquest, but on creativity, not on fear, but on knowledge. And in this sense, Churchill's brief but profound remark stands as both a prophecy and a challenge, urging us to recognize that the true measure of greatness is no longer the empire that rules the land, but the empire that rules ideas. And history will record that those who understood and embraced this truth became the true architects of the future, while those who clung to the old model of empires built on land and war faded into irrelevance, just as surely as sandcastles fade against the tide. And so as we stand today in an age of artificial intelligence, biotechnology, quantum computing, and global communication, we must realize that we are living proof of Churchill's wisdom, for the empires of the future are here. They are mental, digital, intellectual, and cultural, and they will shape the destiny of humankind in ways no king or general of the past could ever have imagined.